All right, beetles. And there are so many types of beetles. Oh, Gabriel, aphids. What do you use for aphids? Like, as in purchasable?
Garden pet does well, or the malathion.
Okay. Thank you. All right, flea beetles. Flea beetles aren't called flea beetles because they look like fleas. They're called flea beetles because they jump like fleas. And they're chewers. They also have scent detectors on their antennae. And if you're trying to figure out if you have flea beetles, you're going to look for a plant that's got little bitty holes all over the leaf like buckshot.
Oh, I see.
That's going to be a flea beetle. And the most common one that we get down here is an eggplant. And in eggplant, it's almost impossible. And then once it gets those holes never recover in the eggplant. And a lot of other crops, if it happens when they're tender, they'll come back out from it. But flea beetles and eggplant don't get along well. Potato beetles, resistant to many insecticides and pesticides. They're chewers, and they strip the plant of foliage. That is also, both of those you can find on your little identification sheet so that you'll know what you're looking at. A lot of people tell us that potato beetles, they have a hard time with garden and pet. Same thing with Japanese beetles that are with Seven Dust. The active ingredient, they're like immune to it at this point. That garden and pet contains permethrin. Permethrin is a product from chrysanthemums. And so it's, even though they can't classify it as organic yet, they're working on organic classification for it. And it does an excellent job because it's a different active ingredient. And it's cheaper, substantially. The garden and pet, it's a great overall like beetle killer. And it's a lot cheaper. Cucumber beetles, they tunnel underground and eat germinating seeds. So your seed doesn't come up and you can't figure out why because you planted it. It may be that you have cucumber beetles. And yes, cucumber beetles are here and they're on your list too. Japanese beetles, it takes 2 years for them to complete a life cycle. And they feed most actively between the temperatures of 83 and 95. They leave only a lace-like remains to your leaf, and they can be killed with milky spore. So milky spore is if you're looking for a way to get the Japanese beetles during that life cycle before you're having to deal with them actively. There's one thing you might consider. Mexican bean bugs, they look sort of like a ladybug, but they're not ladies. They feed from the undersides of the leaves. They love beans, cabbage, kale, collards, mustard greens, leafy things. Okay, deterrents. Crop rotation and good mulch are kind of essential there. But you should never mulch before you have a temperature of 70 because if you do before you have a temperature of 70, you have a tendency to develop fungus and to create habitats for things like snails. You can create bug juice. This is awful gross, but apparently it's very effective. If you have a particular bug that's causing you problems, go out and collect about 2 cups of those bugs. Put them in the blender, do an equal portion of water, blend, put a little bit of dish liquid. You have this dish liquid because this dish liquid is a great adhesive. It works to help products be absorbed into a plant. And in this case, it's going to be a good adhesive for your bug juice. So if you have a bug that's causing you problems, you blend it up, put in a little dish liquid, put it in your sprayer, and go out and spray. Now there's 2 theories as far as why this works. The first theory is that the bug sends out a pheromone, and it's like, oh no! And then all the other bugs of that variety sense that, and they stay away from your plants because they get it, that it's a bad place. The other option is that you spray that stuff on, and when you do, it sends in predators. So bugs that eat those bugs can smell those bugs, and they go, ha-ha! Ladybug, or Japanese beetles. And so they come to eat the Japanese beetles. Hand picking works, but it is time consuming. But if you got it, sounds great. Traps and milky spore do work. You can buy traps, you can make traps using milk jugs. There are all kinds of things online that tell you different ways to make beetle traps. Feed potato bugs to death. This was so cool. You can take wheat bran. Cool. That's horrible. You can take wheat bran, wet the plant down really well, sprinkle wheat bran on it, and potato bugs are like gluttons, and so they will eat and eat and eat until literally they just explode.
You don't need to put them in the blender.
So, no blender necessary. So wheat bran sprinkled on, they will continue to eat. They don't understand to stop eating. They eat until they hemorrhage. And the permethrin products work great on them. Harlequin bugs and squash bugs. Harlequin bugs, they're on there. They're the really pretty little decorative, look sort of like stained glass bugs. They're beautiful, but they're devastating because they love your early crops and they will cause wilt, bleach out spots, and kill your babies. Squash bugs, also called stink bugs, probably a more common name. They damage vine crops, killing young plants and decreasing crop yield. And both can be removed using dust and spray. Both of them can be used, like the Garden and Pet, 7 Dust, any of those products will work. Kill a bug. Caterpillars. There were so many. I chose like the 4 most common that we see around here. Cabbage lopers, also called the inchworm. They're larvae chewers. They eat cabbage and related crops like cold weather crops. And you can make a sick juice with these. So for these, what you do is a cabbage loper, whenever they get sick, sometimes they get a parasite. And you can actually, when they get this parasite, they turn white and they become lethargic on the upper portions of the leaves. And so you go through and pick those off because they contain the parasite. And then you blend those and spray those on, and then you give everyone else the infection, the disease, so they all die. Earworms, this is common in ears of corn. They chew the stalks. This is cool. I never knew why. I never knew why whenever you pull the ear of corn back, sometimes you'll get spots where you don't get germination, or you get little tiny pieces of corn, and you get that because earworms come in and they eat away at the silks before they do germination properly. And so then those little pieces didn't get germinated. So you don't get a big ear in that spot. I've always wondered that. So that's why, and then later they come back and they eat through into the kernels when the kernels are mature. And that's the worm that when you pull back the ear of corn, you get a nasty little green worm, and then that goo is actually poo from the worm. And so that's the earworm. Everyone's pretty good with that one. Cutworms, there are over 100 different moth larvae that are considered cutworms. So the way you're going to know you have cutworms is if you come out and your plant has been cut off, sometimes at the base. So you'll have something like cabbage plants, and the next morning you come out and all of a sudden they're gone. And then hornworms, tomato hornworms, these eat tomatoes and they love leaves. Now, the cool thing about the tomato hornworm is the butterfly, or the moth that it makes. It makes a moth that has, and it's a 5-inch at least. So even though they might eat your tomatoes, you get some pretty moths out of the deal. And most of these, or all the ones that are listed there, can be removed using dipple dust. Biological insecticide. It's also great for things like bagworms. So in the spring, if you have those worms that do the Alright, snails and slugs. So snails have shells, while slugs do not, but they're close cousins. They're both still mollusks. They both still have a muscular foot. They both still have bodies that are very, very sensitive to temperature and very sensitive to moisture. So this is where your diatomaceous earth will be essential. They're active at night, and they need to live near water. They target young, tender plants, leafy vegetables, and marigolds. They love marigolds. So ironically, everything else hates marigolds, but snails and slugs like them. You're going to look for holes in your plants, and usually it's kind of got like a circular kind of edge to it, so it'll have a difference. You'll know whenever you've got one. If you start looking, it'll be obvious because of the kind of hole they make, and they leave a dry slime trail. So if you're trying to figure out if you have them or not, that's what you'll look for. Another thing I did not know, bright note, snails eat dog poo. Alright, snail and slug deterrents. First of all, keep the area clean. Make sure you've not got debris, you don't have decaying vegetation, because they need a moist environment. Mulch with wood ash, eggshells, oak leaves, and sawdust. But sawdust is mainly around strawberries due to the acidity. So, but if you've got strawberries, that'll also keep the berries up off the ground. You'll get good berries. It'll keep the snails away. Be careful when composting. Make sure that when you compost, you're checking the compost, because sometimes you won't realize it and you will spread snails throughout your garden in the process of composting. A barrier can be constructed of crushed limestone around a plant, aluminum foil strips around a plant, human hair cut it finely so that it gets into the foot of the snail then stresses over it and tries to overcompensate by secreting extra mucus. In the process of secreting extra mucus, it dehydrates itself and dies. Plywood cut at an angle, like made on an angle so that when they climb up it, they can't get over. Or even white paint, and that can be spray paint or straight out paint. Apparently they have an issue with crossing over the white line.
The line in the sand.
You can spray them with a 50-50 vinegar and water dilution directly onto the slug. You can do lime juice. Of course, you can use salt. Garter snakes, moles, ducks, toads, turtles, love them. They're an excellent snack. Beer. Okay. Yeah. It's actually not the beer. It's the yeast. So you can actually use something if you're like against the whole having the beer in the house thing. Then you can use a product called near beer. And so the best, according to research, is a thing called Kingsbury malt. So you can get that if that's an issue. If not, Michelob and Budweiser also do well. That's the two brands that are suggested.
Soap,
The soap, yep.
Which one, the bar soap or the Dawn?
No, the Dawn.
Dawn dishwasher.
And it has
a spreader sticker. Anytime we spray around here, whether it be for fungus or insects, we mix in a couple of tablespoons of Dawn per gallon of our spray. Again, it acts as a spreader sticker. It kind of makes the water wetter so that the plant can absorb it, so that it makes a better mist. It's also a very mild fungicide and insecticide in itself, so it'll help kill bugs. But what it also does, as the product dries on the plant, the Dawn leaves a sticky residue which holds that insecticide or fungicide on the plant just that much longer and gives you better residual effectiveness. And it works. Like I said, every time we spray here, we use it.